aka Potato.
No, I'll just put you in. You can just put George if you want. And we should be going live. Everything's saying it's going on YouTube, which is a platform. Annoyingly, auto start was started, but anyway. It's hello, everyone. Give us a wave in the chat if you can hear us and see us. Okay,
I should probably pull up the stream real quick. Oh, here it is.
Yeah,
if I miss it.
The plan was to go to Twitter and LinkedIn as well, but apparently you can only broadcast on Twitter if you have a premium subscription. Great. Fun times. So in true classic fashion, welcome everyone. We haven't started yet. This is just kind of like a small pre-show. Let everybody come in, see how everybody's doing. I
can give a short update on CNC stuff.
Yeah, let's see everybody come in first.
Okay.
Yeah, if people hadn't guessed the joke of this, I think the attempt is to make it a sort of semi-regular type thing between me and George, called the Tech Poutine, which funnily enough is TTP in short. So the good old Tech Potato, with obviously me being potato and George being cheese. If you don't know already, George is from Chips and Cheese. So, and it's going to be a busy time from here on out for the rest of the year, it seems.
Indeed.
I think my schedule is pretty insane. I'm pretty sure I'm in a different country every week between next week and October. And now I've just been called to an event in Berlin in October. So, yeah. And I know we'll be at some events together. The big one being Hot Chips.
Yeah, that's the next. Are you going to Innovation?
I'll be at Innovation.
I'm planning on going to Innovation. I might. I'm also planning. I'm definitely going to SC, but I might also go to Micro in Austin.
When's that?
First week of November, if I remember correctly.
Thing is, for such from Micro Austin. Okay. Yeah, November 2nd, November 6th.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I have something on that week.
I can hear the suffering in your voice.
Yeah. Oh. That's US election week.
Yes.
So get your mailing sorted in advance. I did have a client who was having an event. The election's on Tuesday. The event was on the Wednesday in New York. And
oh boy!
As a collective analyst group, we said, perhaps not, please.
No, please not.
So it has moved. Yeah, it's the past recedes asks Micro what? It's literally a conference called IEEE Micro for Microarchitecture.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, it's not something I've attended in previous years. So,
well, I mean, unsurprisingly, it's stuff that, like reading its backlog, it's stuff that interests me, and something that we're going to be talking about later. Stuff was presented there.
Okay.
Yeah. I have to go figure out which of the 4 papers it was, but it was presented at Micro. Actually, maybe 2 of the papers were presented at Micro.
Yeah. They have a Twitter feed and stuff. IEEE conferences are always fun because you actually get to see the honest to God, researchers and get to ask the
nitty-gritty.
But I think the big one that George and I will be at will be Hot Chips end of August in Stanford. I know I'm getting in early and leaving late. I've got a few interviews scheduled with some CEOs and a few other things that I need to finalize. We'll see what we can do about giving you guys updates. They're long days. I do wonder if we'll have any energy to stream after each day.
Yeah.
It has been done. So we'll see.
So I am... hopefully we should have some more. So since you brought up interviews, if you've noticed, if you watched the last live stream I was in with Ian, the background has changed, as has all this. So I'm testing something new. I got camera
George
equipment
wants to make videos.
Yeah,
or at least interview people.
Yeah, it's, interviews more so than videos. So I got a proper camera, a Fujifilm X S20, and DJI mics and all the tripod stuff and everything to do interviews. Because thank you, Ian, for basically lending me your camera equipment and helping me with the Mike Clark interview. But that was so well received that it was sort of like, yeah, we really should do this again, and we should get our own stuff.
I'll drop a link in the chat. At AMD's Tech Day a couple of weeks ago, was it now?
Yeah. Doesn't feel like it, but it was.
George and I got some time with Mike Clark, and I helped George record an interview. I've just dropped a link to the interview on the Chips and Cheese channel. If you like the stuff that George does, do go and subscribe. And yeah, that was very well received. So the idea is do a bit more. I have a feeling that if we have time, if people are in the area, we should do a TechPotato and a Chips and Cheese get together. So anybody who does watch or read what we do, we can all just hang out somewhere. So
apparently you're a little quiet according to chat.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
It's we're using StreamYard, and StreamYard should automatically adjust my volume. Plus, I also have fans going because I'm in the UK and it's quite hot today. But also to mention, my background has changed because I can't show you what's behind me. And let's just leave it at that. I did try changing the green screen to something, but then I realized my green screen doesn't go all the way to the edge. And my lighting is so terrible, you get flickery. I've tried in OBS and it's a bit flickery, so.
Camera stuff is a bit finicky.
Yeah, it's
my gain is still. I've set my gain. My gain is at -5 now, which I think is like minus 20 dB.
It's. I think it's because when you get excited, George, you peak. And I brought you down just below that, and obviously as the adrenaline goes, that's microarchitecture.
Yeah, I know. I could go. It's not worth it.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, busy times ahead. We're also testing and reviews. We've got chips coming out through the rest of the year, not just consumer stuff, but we expect the enterprise stuff. So we'll see. We'll see how much sleep we get.
What is sleep? I don't know what this is.
You're young. You have 10 years. You are 10 years, at least 10 years younger than me. So you have no excuse.
I mean, last night I can tell you I got maybe 2 hours of sleep because I've been trying to finish up this stinking article. So I woke up at like 6 a.m. because I went to bed at 4, and that's that. I'm running on that and copious amounts of coffee at this point in time.
That's what it's there for.
Jordan, you haven't really missed anything. We've just been chatting.
Yeah. So welcome to everybody who's come in. It's So Jordan is here. What's he called his channel name today? Jordan's Tech Junk. Yeah. Crispy's here. We've got 8-Bit Bunny, Fixed Function,
Bionic, Schmarv.
Darrell's here. Hey Darrell, how's it going? And Navjack. Some regulars. Perina, I think I saw.
And Jelly, of course.
Davina's here as well. Cool. It's I'm not going to say we have a quorum because that will just mean that everything just breaks. That's usually what happens.
That's just classic.
Yeah. And so we've got some stuff planned for the show. I'll go through it in a second when we get started, and we'll do some Q&A at the end as well. And yeah, this is, as I said, episode 1 of the Tech Poutine, and this is where my system keeps juddering in front of me. Yay, Threadripper. Yeah, and to answer the question in advance, if I'm potato and he's cheese, where's the gravy? We may have a gravy at some point, or we might have special guests in the future, and we just call those gravy, because if we get a special guest, yeah, it's gravy.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether that's Wendell, Steve, Mike,
yeah.
See what goes on. It's I don't know.
Being called the Jelly. Jelly not being comfortable being called gravy. There's irony in there somewhere.
Wendell could be gravy, yes. Okay, I'm gonna get this show on the road, and see what goes on. We don't actually have an intro, so
no.
I'll just take
intro music here at some point, maybe.
Tech Poutine. I don't know. We'll go commission an intro and make it half decent. We'll speak about Poutine in the Q&A and see what the opinions are. But welcome everyone. You are here at the inaugural episode of the Tech Poutine, featuring potato and cheese. For those who don't know,
hello.
I'm Ian from the channel TechTechPotato, and this is George from
Chips
channel,
and Cheese.
From Chips and Cheese. We have no gravy. We save gravy for special guests. And we aim to be a semi-regular podcast talking about the latest in semiconductors, microarchitecture, the technology that fascinates us, the technology that we love, that we write about, that we experience, and that we share with you guys, and provide some, more unfiltered thoughts, I guess is the right way to say.
Yeah.
And we have a schedule today. I will put let's start a new banner and say Mentionables. So our main topic today is going to be AMD Zen 5. We're going to go through the slide decks of the most recent tech day we had, plus the deeper microarchitecture dive that we all requested and AMD thankfully gave us at the start of this week. So I think we've had 48 hours to go through that. And so let's get on to the mentionables, because there's been quite a few things happening this week. And if you're not in the tech industry,
yeah.
If you're not in the tech industry, you've had an easy week. So let's start at the top and spend a couple of minutes each on these. First of all was the CrowdStrike bug. For those of you who don't know, CrowdStrike is essentially security software, one of the big 3, and hundreds of millions of systems have this installed to help with security. That's basically what it is. Your business may use it and you don't even know it. An update was pushed. The joke being it was intern on day 1, and it made a large number of Windows-only based systems blue screen. And this has grounded flights It has caused rail delays. It has stopped hospital appointments. People haven't been able to access the money in their bank.
I mean, it's brought down parts in certain.
Please tell me if you can't hear George, because I can't. So, we've been CrowdStriked. You might need to twist the audio on your camera, George. Yeah, episode 1, and we're already having technical difficulties. Last time this happened, I can't hear you at all. No, George. Did your microphone turn off because you're not recording? If this happens every 10 minutes, then we'll have to find a way. Anyway, I'll continue with the news while George sorts it out. Let's go to persona non grata. So CrowdStrike, if you didn't know, caused a blue screen issue that was eventually found, and the fix was restart the machine, and if it boots so far enough to update, then it will fix itself. If not, you need to boot into safe mode and delete a file. That was the fix that came out. Unfortunately, when you have a company with thousands of systems, each with individual BitLocker keys, it becomes a manual process. So it's speaking with people online, it wasn't so much an issue that they could automate the fix for. Because of this whole BitLocker, and companies enable BitLocker for security anyway. So people spent ages restarting machines, just deleting a file. And I saw images of people in airports, even going to the displays at airports, and having to manually get up a step ladder and fiddle with a mini PC because they can't remote in, and IPMI is a bit iffy. Davina, it says 8.5 million systems affected. Plenty of people in my community, in George's community, in our Discord servers were going about fixing this. And this is a function. Let's see if George is back. Hello? It's your cable.
Uh-oh. There we go.
No, you're fine.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay, so I was just saying a lot of people in both of our communities have been going through this issue, trying to fix it. I read somewhere today that due to plane issues and an engine exploding on a runway, somebody's 15-year-old child, somebody in the US, their child is still stuck in Italy, and the next flight they're giving the child is in 5 days.
Ouch.
So it's to do with user space and kernel space. CrowdStrike's defense is a kernel driver. So it activates before the OS has a chance to. It's been a fun few days and it's still not 100% fixed, but most things are back online. I'm thankful I wasn't traveling. Given how much I travel, it's crazy. Are you right there, George? You got it fixed yet?
Yeah, I just forgot to turn the camera back, like the little monitor.
So Pirate's comment here is basically what I saw a lot of people saying. Company EC fixed the file, but all the laptops had BitLocker enabled. So no end user has admin rights, so you have to go get your individual BitLocker keys wherever they're stored and just copy them over once and twice and once and twice. It has caused a bit of a debate about whether things should be kernel-based. There's a bigger argument here. This isn't the time and place for that, but whether Pluton is something that can make this happen at an even lower layer, right? And what that could do to a system. It's one of the reasons why Charlie from Semi-Accurate is really down on Pluton, especially if you have a foreign state actor involved.
So What's funny is Microsoft blamed the EU for this because of a 2009 ruling from the EU Commission that prevented Microsoft from locking out kernel updates, like kernel security features. Now, you could debate it 6 ways to Sunday if Microsoft has legitimate grievances there. But point is that you could point the finger 15 different places at this point in time. I'll fix the gate again.
It's all right. It's all right. I've got you. I'll do it from here.
Okay.
Yeah. I found a setting.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. It's yeah, so that's CrowdStrike. And funnily enough, today we've also had another Windows blue screening issue. Windows has pushed out an update that's causing some systems to essentially re-request BitLocker keys. So it's a blue screen, but it's a different blue screen. Which again means if you've just had your system fixed due to the CrowdStrike bug, you now need to give your system back to your IT admin to go get your BitLocker key put in again. So that's fun. There's an article from PC World on it. That's it's quite fun. Thank you, Erkin, for the 100. Is it still Turkish lira? I don't know. We need a 3D surface editor for curve shaper maps. I think he's referring to what's coming later down the line. So also in topics, we have to mention Intel. Not going to cover it here in any substantial depth, because it's still an ongoing thing. Lots of FUD going everywhere. Lots of theories, lots of statements. But simply put, there's an issue with 13th and 14th gen Intel CPUs causing a not insignificant number to fail. It's hard to gauge exactly how much, because a lot of the statistics we're seeing are from gamers and high-end systems or from high-performance systems in enterprise.
So in terms of the one sort of part of the 13th and 14th gen issues that I have had sort of not play in, but like I have some knowledge about is the Minecraft stuff that Buildzoid published yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that actually came from somebody in the Chips and Cheese community, and the numbers were very interesting when I started looking at them. I was like, how it really does make you wonder. Again, people are going, "Oh, Intel has a QA issue. Intel has a QA issue." Well, one, wait until the final report is out. But two, Intel's been doing this for how long?
It's
and it's like so what happened that this situation could have cropped up for? Like that's sort of that's sort of what I'm thinking is what happened differently here.
What if there was a change in some of their post-silicon validation?
Mm-hmm.
Did they leave something out? Are they not testing the right things? You'd think Intel would test the right things. Is this a hardware issue? Is this a manufacturing issue? Is this a firmware issue? A lot of theory has been coming out. A lot of people has been spouting opinion as fact. But the lead person who kind of cracked this open was Wendell. He posted his video 2 weeks ago. I did a live stream with him, for those that remember. He's also been on a number of other channels talking about this. I've done some additional things on the back end about looking into some of these issues. Initially, I thought it was a physical issue relating to the socket. That still may be part of it. There's one source, Gamers Nexus was in contact with somebody speaking about an issue regarding the manufacturing in the liner with the vias, and the vias. I've done some research into that, and unfortunately, there's a knowledge issue there as to exactly what the process entails, and my sources are saying that actually it happens in a slightly different way. Oxidation doesn't really happen under vacuum unless you have oxygen-basing precursor chemicals. Unfortunately, some of those recipes are closely guarded secrets, and everybody tweaks it differently. Or you may use a different recipe for a low-level metal layer versus a high-level metal layer, and some of this stuff is changing. And we've heard ruthenium, copper, tantalum nitride, tantalum itself, and all those sorts of things being involved. There is scope here for, I think, once it peters out, we can do a deeper dive into it. About how we're done in the community and kind of draw a timeline under it.
Jordan has just put forward a new hypothesis. It's because you try to eat all the wafers, so you try to bite it all.
If I buy a wafer, it only contaminates that wafer. So
see, that's why you have clones there trying to bite all of them at the same time.
It's I do have to call out one really stupid thing, and that's Tom's Hardware. Having to call them out again. They published a tweet related to a headline talking about next generation Intel chips. Well, they could be up the shit as well. Excuse language, but it was a really crappy title. Basically stirring the pot when they didn't need to, all in the name of clicks. I think I've made my vocalizations on that company well known at this point, given the fact that I used to work with the same publisher. So Intel 13th, 14th, we'll address it when I think it's kind of finalized and we've got an end-to-end fix on it. If an end-to-end fix is something that may exist. A couple of other topics just in the mentionables before we hit the headline. AMD head of the AI group, Victor Peng, has announced
president. Isn't he president?
President. CEO of the guy in charge of basically the Xilinx group, what they call it, embedded programmable logic or something. And then he was also tasked with heading up the company-wide AI strategy. So the president of the AI group. So he is going to be retiring at the end of August, literally only a few days after he gives the keynote at Computex. And as far as I'm aware, he's still giving that keynote.
Yeah.
He's on my to-interview list. It would be really fun to interview him before he retired, just in the same way that I interviewed the CEO of Synopsys before he retired back in December. That was fun. So, yeah, it's AMD's losing one of their senior execs, so that's worth mentioning. I'll also add that Intel is also lost one of its senior execs. The GM of the Xeon side, Lisa Spellman, who, again, I've interviewed for this channel. She is moving to be the CEO of Cornelis Networks. And if you don't know Cornelis, but you remember the name Intel Omnipath, that's the company that acquired the Omnipath IP. I've done a short on it. They were at Supercomputing last year. They'll be at Supercomputing this year. I've already spoke to Lisa. And we'll see if we can get her on the channel as well to speak about high-speed networking with Omnipath, but Cornelis Omnipath, not Intel Omnipath. That's fun. I have some news. The followers of the channel may remember I did a show with Sally Ward-Foxton called the AI Hardware Show. And we are going to be filming season 2 starting next week. Sally and I and my camera team, we've gone through. We think we're going to have something like 14 episodes if we can get them all through, which is insane. We're going to theme each episode this year. So there'll be one on optical, one on the Korean AI chips, one on data center training, one on data center inference, one on edge, one on CPUs. There's going to be a whole episode just for Intel as well, because Intel has so many AI things. There's going to be an AI PC episode. So we're deep into the writing scripts now. So that's going to be coming, and hopefully we're going to put that on a regular cadence come September. So that's a little bit of news from me. And just because it's here, I did want to bring up TSMC's financials, just because they came out a few days ago. Some people aren't interested in the financials. They're operating at a 53% gross margin, which is about the same. But what I wanted to bring up was here. This is their revenue by process node. Normally, we consider leading edge everything 7 nanometer and below. Now they're above a good 50% of their revenue is now on the leading edge, all EUV.
67%.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I bet you a majority of that 7 nanometer is probably nowadays 6. So
yeah. The 7 nanometer is the family
of
nodes, and as you can see, 7 is a family which includes 6. 5 is a family that includes 4. 3 is a family that will include 2, I believe, and then after that we have 16A, which is the new family coming 25, 26 or so.
Okay.
It's a platform. HPC is basically anything bigger than a smartphone. So laptop chips, desktop chips, AI chips. This is revenue. This isn't the volume. And I say this because if we go back up to here, the revenue by technology, usually these 3 are about 20% of TSMC's volume, or 25. Whereas 80% of the volume is all the legacy stuff. People seem to forget that. So TSMC does 12 million wafers a year?
I thought they were saying that they may hit 15 this year.
They almost hit 15 when we had the super spike.
Okay.
But then they went back down.
Okay.
I need to go back over these numbers, but their cost per wafer keeps going up anyway. So I think last quarter it was averaging about $6,300 per wafer. That's across all process nodes. So if 75% of your wafers are in this small region, and the other 25% are in this region, people are paying a lot. Let's see if we have any other information here. Cash flows, numbers, guidance, recap of major events. Okay. No, not particularly. That's all I had on mentionables. Is there anything you want to bring in, George?
I guess lots of do you want to bring up, so you mentioned server previously, and I think one of the most interesting topics at Hot Chips is going to be Ampere, because they're not chasing what everybody else is chasing. So they're not chasing, and we'll get into this with the Zen 5 stuff, but they're chasing sort of what cloud providers want, which is very different to what consumer or even standard enterprise wants. So I think that's going to be one of the most interesting presentations because of that dichotomy. So they're going to be wanting different things, so to speak.
Yeah, I still plan to do a video about this a preview about Hot Chips, but we can go through it here super quick as well. So Hot Chips 3-day conference held in Stanford, usually in the Bay Area. This year it's in Stanford. Day 1 on the Sunday, or day 0 really, is tutorials. So in this case, it's AI assisted hardware design beginning, and second session, then thermals. So AI thermals. We got Supermicro here. We got next generation cooling for NVIDIA. So this will probably go into the Blackwell liquid cooling systems. Then we go into edge devices. This one's going to be interesting because it's being given by Fluor Systems. Fluor makes the small super.
I didn't know that they were having a presentation. I missed that.
When this first went out, there weren't any names attached to who was giving the talks.
Okay, that might be why I missed it.
Either that or the tutorials weren't populated. And just to answer Zevos, yes, there'll be a chat Q&A coming at the end. So you can pepper some questions in, and if we see them. And then we have thermoelectric cooling. Day one, day one, we've got Orion, Lunar Lake, and next generation IBM Z. That'll be fun. And AI inferencing accelerator chipset. So we may get some information there. Then we have specialized processors. So SK Hynix doing its acceleration in memory system. Then we have Edge, next generation Intel 6 SoC, which I assume would be Granite Rapids D.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it's Granite Rapids. Looking at so Praveen previously did the presentation on Ice Lake D. I want to say in 2021 or 2022. So yeah, I expect that to be Granite Ridge D.
I also had a look at the most recent update to the Intel Microarchitecture document, the one that tells you about all new instructions.
Yeah.
Granite Rapids D has some new instructions that none of the rest have. So it's clearly going to have a special place.
There's a big question I have about Granite Rapids D that also, side note, dang it, AMD, why'd you name it Granite Ridge?
Yeah. The D series processors typically are 5G ORAN comms, that sort of stuff. So then we have a keynote from OpenAI. So what they say, Blackwell, and then Salmonova. It says that Salmonova are the only CGRA architecture based in the AI space, and SN40L is their first generation cerulean architecture. So hopefully they'll go into details about how they've improved CGRAs. And then the general AI processors, Gaudi 3, MI300. We shouldn't really see anything new there. Broadcom with their optical attach, that should be interesting. And then Furiosa AI, they called it a tensor contraction processor. I wonder if this is their second generation Renegade, which they announced last week. So day two, Edge, so Versal AI. Stanford's doing because there was always some academics papers in here. And then Meta with their MTIA, which we believe uses Andy's RISC-V cores. So that's Meta's inference chip.
Interesting.
And then we have, go on, sorry.
Now, getting to this next section, I'm still wondering what happened to Dojo. Like Dojo, the chip Dojo.
So it still exists. They were doing a $500 million facility in Buffalo. Eric is a guy I've been connected with since the initial announcement. They have had some people leave on the team since the announcement, and so I've already reached out, and I may get some insights in advance. We'll see what he can get approved ahead of time, so we can go live with some content the minute it gets announced. And Fabrica is a startup doing optical acceleration, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then Intel, it's 4 terabit chiplet, which IR Labs presented last year. Different technology, different product, even though they're part. Yeah, it works out weird.
Different product, same technology?
No, so it's both optical, but it's different IP.
Okay.
So it's funny how this got approved, even though IR Labs was presenting it in the open. Yeah. Then Victor with a second day keynote. More processors. We've got Marvell doing their new CXL. That's what that looks like. New CXL expanders. And Chinese Academy of Sciences. Ooh, Chinese processor.
Jianqian. I do apologize to all native Mandarin speakers. I completely butchered that. But that, to me, is also going to be very interesting because, as far as I know, it's a fully Chinese processor. It's not like Hygon, where they just basically license Zen 1 IP from AMD. This, as far as I know, is developed in-house by China. So this may be very, very different to what we're used to seeing. I don't expect that many differences, but there could be, say, major cache differences. If I remember correctly, this actually had a very odd L1 and L1.5 setup.
Yeah.
That was sort of the flip of Lion Cove.
It's the Chinese Academy of Sciences, so it's still academic, but it does say meeting industrial grade standards, so it's edge focused, it sounds like. And then the final session is Ampere 1. We hope finally getting a deep dive into Siren. Maya 100, that'll be nice and fun because Microsoft announced Maya and Cobalt last year. Zen 5, which is what we're going to speak about today.
Yep.
And then Preferred Networks is doing their second generation MN core. The first generation was this 3,000 square millimeter 4 chiplet behemoth.
Yeah.
Which I remember writing about pre-pandemic. So interesting to see there. And then obviously some posters for the people who weren't able to get some talks. And these are mostly academics as well. So interesting conversations about the papers last year. So,
So I think with that, to Zen 5?
Yeah, let me see if I can change the banner to say Zen 5. I still have a banner here that says Omnipath lives. So it showed AMD Zen 5 deep dive, and I need to share my screen again on the right window because we're having fun. And so this is all embargoed until a few hours prior. This went out live. There are a few websites with this information already. I know George is still working on an article. But I thought, because it's so new and this is what we want to talk about, let's go ahead. Can I make that banner smaller? Or do I have to make it so it's... bear with me 1 second. There you go. So, number one, cautionary statement. Everything in this presentation may or may not be true. If you want to know the performance of the company, look at our financial disclosure forms with the FTC and the SEC. They're called the 10K and the 10Q forms. It's a standard boilerplate. And here we have Zen 5. So update over Zen 4. And I think the headline here is that Zen 5, if you've not read anything about it already, is a fundamentally baseline, fresh sheet of paper design. When Jim Keller was last at AMD, he was appalled at the fact that they weren't redesigning their baseline every other generation. In his own words, and you can watch the interview with this, every 2 or 3 years, companies get in a slump and only redesign the baseline every 5 to 10 if they can help it, because it's so much easier getting the low-hanging fruit 3 or 4 times. So what Zen 5 is, the same with Zen 1 and Zen 3, is a clean sheet design from the ground up. That doesn't stop them using stuff that was in the previous cores.
Well,
Zen 1 used 80% of the same IP blocks as the last generation of Piledriver, but in a better way.
I wouldn't call Zen 3 clean sheet, at least not in the same way that this is clean sheet.
Yeah,
it was very much an evolution, but it wasn't revolution. right? Like, I'm not taking anything away from Zen 3 and its designers. Don't get me wrong. I have a 5950X as my main system. Great CPU, great architecture. But what Zen 5 is, I hesitate. Yeah, and in one respect, I'm going to send you something that you can put up when we get to it.
Yep.
But
yeah, I see it.
Yeah. So when we get to that, you can pull that up as better imagery. But yeah, it's very much a revolution in at least one, if not more, aspects.
Yeah, it's I seem to have lost everything. You sent me this image, and my system can't hack it. No, it's good. Yeah, so new foundation for the compute for the future. This is what Zen. So this is Zen 5. Zen 6 is going to be iterative, and then Zen 7 we expect to be not just iterative, but a bit more change, and that's the way it's going on. We already know Zen 6 is coming. That was announced. Mike Clark in my interview said Zen 7, but he's already said Zen 8 in a previous video. So, we know these numbers are coming.
Absolute shock. AMD's developing a next generation CPU. Wow, more news at 11.
Yeah, global exclusive Zen 13. Wait, 13th gen? Oh. Yeah. So the idea is that they do a performance uplift. Major single thread and dual thread performance increase. Will go into the exact fundamentals of that. Why the big one of the big changes here is that AVX 512 now has a 512-bit data path
on Granite Ridge.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. It's a bit of pick and choose, right?
Yeah.
It's data path is a bit of a misnomer here because you can have a data path and execution path, and we'll get into that. But the whole point is, remember when AMD introduced AVX 512, people kept calling it double pumped, and I have to complain that's not the right term. Double pumped has historically mean double frequency. It just means 2 cycles to do it cracks the instruction up into 2 ops and just does 1 per cycle.
So I can kind of understand why they said that.
It's not they. It's because Mark Papermaster said it on stage, unfortunately.
It might be.
Yeah, they didn't have a better way of explaining it that people would understand. And the last time we had a double pumped ALU in a CPU was Pentium
4.
Something? Yeah, P4.
Pentium 4. But so basically what Zen 4 did was from the load side all the way down to the register file, it was treated as 1 op, essentially. And then at the execution units and at the store side, it was broken up into essentially 2 ops and then dealt with from there.
Yep. You had some overhead to do that, but you did save on die area. So it's a trade-off. It's not as simple as just cracking it into 2 cycle executions, because there are things that AVX 512 does that AVX 2 doesn't. So you need extra register stuff for that to happen. Swizzles,
more going from 16 to 32 architectural registers, a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. So now the base design of Zen 5, we'll get into Zen 5C and the different SoC variants that they're both going into, but the base design is aimed to support a full, front end to back end to memory 512-bit data and execution path. In terms of support, we are going to see the return of the C cores, so Zen 5 and Zen 5C. This is where it gets confusing, because AMD will call these classic and compact, even though internally these are called dense. Unless they're E-cores, in which they're called economy.
you and I were just absolutely losing it when Joe McCurry said that on stage.
Yeah, Joe McCree is CTO of a lot of stuff. He's also on the boards for the memory standards as well. And he went out and he took a big jab at Intel by calling the E-cores economy cores, not efficient cores. And not a lot of people in the room got it. However, George and I were laughing through the tears.
yeah, we were almost on the floor with laughter.
Yeah. So, and then we get into the support configurable FP512, FP256 data path. This is what George was alluding to. There are some parts that will have the full 512-bit data path and execution path, and there are some that will stick with a 256. And AMD is going to make that decision based on the end product and the die area, everything else. So there will be IPC differences when IPC tests include FP512 instructions. Most don't these days, but it means for peak throughput. For example, mobile doesn't necessarily need 512, the full throughput, but a desktop or a workstation would, and an enterprise system would. But that's also that's applicable to both Zen 5 and Zen 5C, if I remember correctly.
Yes. So well, actually, I think Zen 5C has the full. So I think they said that Zen 5C can support the full 512-bit data path.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
whether we see it in production is a different question. We don't know anything about epics yet. Just so you know, that's coming later in the year. We don't know anything about Turin
yet. All we know is up to 192 cores, and that's number of chiplets, and that's roughly about it. It's on 3 nanometer. One of them is. The other one isn't.
So yeah, Zen 5, they've got 4 and 3 nanometer cores that they can stick into stuff, and an enhanced ISA. So this is the instruction set. We'll get into the new instructions because there are some comments there. But those are the overlying headlines. Before we get right into the architecture, it's worth saying that they were saying 16% IPC increase this generation. Though from our perspective, that's probably going to be a bit low based on the changes made.
It depends on what you're doing.
It does depend on what you're doing. And that answer is only going to get worse as time goes on because workloads are diverging in their utility, especially when you add AI into the mix. So first slide is, and I hope you guys can, this is coming through a high enough definition. The microarchitecture overview. It's we'll get about 8 slides in, and we'll do a direct Zen 4 versus Zen 5 compare. But yeah, George, why don't you take us through this?
Oh boy. Okay. Where do I want to start? You know what? Let's start at the first part. So can you actually go to the next? I think it's the next slide.
Yeah. Okay. This is the overview. Let's go into the individual.
Here we go. Okay. This slide is if you know what the academics have been, what academia said 30 years ago, you're going, oh my God, I've seen this. So what this is in sort of short form is this is what is known as a multiple ahead branch predictor. So what that means is it can deal with multiple taken branches at a time. This specific design for Zen 5 can do 2 taken branches per cycle. For context, the only way that as far as I'm aware, the only other CPUs on the market that have been able to do more than 1 taken branch per cycle have used a loop predictor. That's not what this is. This is not using its loop predictor to do more than 1 taken branch per cycle. This is a complete and utter re-architecting of the front end and of the branch predictor.
So branch predictor, for those who are new to microarchitecture design, is when you have a conditional in your code it will say, well, does it mean to go down this way, or does it mean to go down that way? What George is explaining is normally a processor will have essentially a list of potential branches and just go through them one by one and use a loop iterative. And the idea is that depending on which branch you take, it can either keep or reject what it's already pulled into cache. With this multi-branch predictor, instead of it going out and finding one branch at a time, it can find, or two branches at a time. If any of those have a branch, they can also go after those branches as well. So it's a hierarchical branch prediction structure, not just simply a tree loop. Or a point casing tree loop, whatever you want to call it. And to do that, you need to put in the... Companies are usually pretty protective of what's in their branch predictor. I remember Zen 1 was like a simple layer perceptron, the very earliest AI type stuff. We've now seen a Tage branch predictor, which is, again, something that went into academia.
So what's funny is one of the papers, so Cesnak et al., I think the paper is literally called Multiple Ahead Branch Predictor. Oh, Multiple Ahead Block Predictors. I can't remember the exact name off the top of my head at this very moment.
It's a paper from 1996.
But that same author, Andrei Cesnak, was one of the key inventors of Tage.
Yeah.
And he's still writing to this day about branch predictors. So it just goes to show that these people have been working at it for 30 years, right?
It's just like packaging. EMIB for Intel took 12 years to productization. This stuff took 30 years.
Yeah. But so to answer a question from Kirby Luis, no, it doesn't evaluate both branches and never be wrong. That's not how this works. So if you have a branch, right? If you take a branch and then you hit, so you pull in a code block, right? You pull in a cache line. You then basically look at the cache line, and when you hit a taken branch, that's where it stops. And the CPU then has to then calculate where that branch is going to go. With this design, while that's happening on essentially one of the fetch pipes and one of the predictors, the CPU can still look forward to a non-contiguous cache line that isn't just the next one over. It can skip and look forward, find the next block of instructions that it needs, pull that, find the taken branch, and then fetch from there, which is utterly mind-blowing. I've been trying to write this article for longer than these slides have been out, actually, but because I was sort of tipped off to it when I was talking with a few other folks, and I was like, "Holy crap, this is insane!" But it's been really hard.
It's bearing in mind George isn't even 30 years old. This is older than George.
Yeah. This is
It's but so does this mean with a core that's running 2 threads, they can each take one of those?
So I asked AMD about this. So I sent a bunch of questions to Matthew to send up the line after and that was one of my questions. It was, how does SMT change things? And unfortunately, back when all these papers were published, SMT was not even in the picture, really. So my speculation, and this is pure speculation.
George needs a branch predictor.
Yes, is that when they're running SMT, they can use one of the other features that Cesnak talks about and essentially pipeline the branch, the instruction fetch, even though you only have one fetch pipe per decode cluster, which gets partitioned when you're in SMT mode. So it gets complicated, and I don't have good answers. That's my pure speculation.
Mm-hmm. You actually touched on the other big thing that this core does, and it starts with this side of the CPU, the fact that instead of having a 4-wide decoder, we have two 4-wide decoders.
So,
which for those of you who know your microarchitecture, this is what Tremont did, which is Intel's Atom. Instead of being a 3-wide decoder, they went to two 3-wide decoders, meaning you can decode two instruction paths at once.
So yes, but as far as I know, Intel's the branch predictor in Tremont, Gracemont, and Crestmont, I don't know about Skymont because it's not out yet, cannot do what this branch predictor can.
Yeah. But
and the reasons why AMD did this are very different to why Intel did it. Intel wanted more decode width and to increase fetch bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
AMD did this to better fit their branch predictor.
Yeah. So Tremont is several generations old at this point. The only reason I bring it up is because that's the first time we saw it.
No. We did see this one time previously.
Don't tell me obscure processor number 6 from
Steamroller. Steamroller technically did have split decode clusters, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but it also had split branch predictors and split caches and.
Well, no, it didn't have the split branch predictor. It was basic, but they did that in order to increase, to increase fetch bandwidth. I'm still clipping.
It's right, I've got you.
This is what happens when I get excited.
We weren't expecting to see this. We weren't expecting to see innovation at the branch prediction level.
Not like this, no. And again, here's some more speculation from me. That 16K L1 BTB, I think that's actually a dual ported BTB, because if you read Cesnak, that's one of the things that the paper says you can do to get the most out of the two-head branch predictor, yet not explode area by adding a second BTB, like a second sort of duplicated BTB.
Yeah.
So
it's as we go through most of the core, you'll hear the term dual ported a lot. And a lot of that is to deal with the fact that we now have two 4-wide decoders, the fact that we can do multiple look-ahead branch predictions. It's even going from, say, the decode to the op cache, right? And my comparison here, again, I'm going to go back to Tremont. Tremont was 2 3-wide decode, but had no op cache. That was their way of avoiding an op cache. Whereas AMD has put both, because we're dealing with a much smaller there's much large transistor budget. The op cache has increased. You can put fuse instructions in there. And while the decode engine can, you can have 8 ops out the decode.
So I think if you pull up the image that I sent you, I think that would help.
I may have to change screens just a second. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, this is the George.
Yeah, this is my best rendition of how this branch predictor works.
Yeah. So okay, you can see my mouse now. Yeah, so you've got two queues, two 4-way decoders, and now the decoders come macro ops. Thing is, you've got this big op cache, which saves the macro ops just in case they need to be reused. Mm-hmm. I think that's gone up from 4K to 6K entries.
So it went from 4K to 6.75, and then 4. And now they've reduced it a little bit, which isn't surprising because I'm almost positive that op cache is inclusive in the L1. Yeah. So if you figure it out, 6.75K times the number of bytes is that's 27K of instructions. Yeah, I'm not surprised they reduced it.
But you can also put 12 macro ops from the op cache per cycle into the macro op queue. And you might think this is weird. 12 and then 8. 12 and then 8. But then the macro op queue can only dispatch 8 into the execution pipeline. We'll get into there in a second. Yeah. Let me bring back the previous. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So yeah, 2 instruction fetch streams for the iCache to deal with the technically it says BRAC prediction, just because there's a typo in the slides.
Yeah,
fun times. So decode advances. So they say 30. Yeah. So the op cache is 16-way. It used to be 12-way, so more associativity. You can now have dense entries. I think previously it was just simple entries. Ones that decode 1-to-1. Now you can have fused, and then that's not overclocking pipes.
Yeah, that's op cache pipes. 2
op cache pipes at 6 instructions per pipe, so you can get 12 instructions per cycle. And some dual pipes. SMT mode gives each thread a pipe.
So it gives each SMT thread a decode cluster, essentially.
Yeah. So and they're not sliced in any way.
No.
So
the op cache and the branch predictor will still be independent of that splitting. So SMT mode does not affect the op cache, and I do not believe it affects the branch predictor either.
Yeah. And then 8-way dispatch into the integer and floating point. We'll get into some of the sizes of these structures later in the comparison. But we'll move on to the integer side. How would you describe? So, for the people who are new, who aren't up to speed with microarchitecture, why do cores have an integer and a vector side to their cores in the execution?
So, well, I was going to say that would be true for almost every company except for Intel, but that's no longer the case.
So no. So I'm not just talking about the schedule. I'm just talking about why they exist in the first place. Why is there an integer side? Why is there an FP side?
So the integer side exists to run like the branch predictor. That's where you would run your branch prediction, where you would retire branches, and then you have your basic sort of operations, right? Your 64-bit standard. I need to go jump to this pointer over there, okay, or add these 2 pointers together. That's what the integer side does.
When you're speaking of, so it does the math, it does the integer math. When you're ever doing loops counting from 0 to 100, whatever. Also, if you need to know what address you're accessing, you usually have a value for the address plus an offset, and that offset may be variable based on a prior calculation. But that's all integer workflows. You're not dealing with any floating point numbers in there. So if your address 1A and you've got to add another 1A to it, you end up at 3C or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Address 38 in hex. So that's address generation unit, the which generates addresses, the arithmetic logic unit, the ALU that does the math. You've got multipliers here because multiples on integers is a prominent thing. And then the branch predictors, which helps with the address generation with the branches, almost special case. Divisions don't happen here, do they?
They do.
Oh,
you can have integer divisions, yes.
But usually that's special math to deal with remainders as well.
So yes and no. It depends on your ISA. So like RISC-V does not, if I remember the RISC-V spec correctly, the div instruction or the div sort of instruction set does not actually require you to implement the remainder instruction.
Right. Okay. So yeah,
if I remember, I might be wrong, but so like x86, when you do a div, you will get the divisor and the remainder. For something like ARM, all you have a separate div and remainder instruction. So they are treated differently in different ISAs.
Fun. And then on the vector side,
on the vector side,
why do we have a vector side?
To do big math, to do SIMD, or single instruction multiple data. So if I want to crunch, say, 8 64-bit numbers all at once, I would use the vector side. It's also there to deal with numbers that have little tiny dots in them, which get really annoying with rounding.
FP64, FP32, FP16, FP8, all this sort of stuff goes through the vector side, because you have to adhere to standards when it's rounding. The very famous thing being in FP32, 0.3 isn't an ideal. It's 0.299999964 or something, because that's how math works in a computer. Unless you convert it all to integer into hex, like we do when we're calculating pi. That makes it easier. But as a result, the reason why we have these two sides of the processor is because different instructions need different things, whether you're doing math, whether you're doing instruction. And as a result, they have different requirements. And AMD's taken a different approach to how it's doing integer versus vector this time around.
A little bit?
So there are arguments for, say, increasing the schedulers on the integer side. They use a different argument for decreasing the schedulers on the vector side.
Well, they didn't decrease the... So you have those flipped.
Okay.
So on the integer side, they went from 4 schedulers. So if you want to actually go down to the comparison slide, it's down.
That one.
There.
No, I'll save that for later.
Okay.
I want to go through.
They went from 4 24 entry schedulers, 3 of which had AGUs on them, and all 4 had ALUs on them, to 2 schedulers. An integer scheduler, an ALU scheduler that just deals with ALUs and all the math. And then you have a separate AGU scheduler that deals just with all the storage stuff, such as
address generation.
All the memory stuff. I shouldn't say storage. All the memory stuff.
Yep.
Now, on the vector side, they've actually added a 3rd scheduler. They used to have 2 32-entry schedulers. Now they have 3 32-entry schedulers. And the justification for this is that vector operations normally have more... They're more complicated, and they can have more than one they can take more than one cycle. They do take more than one cycle. They can have more than one operation, like micro op. Whereas on the integer side, with division sort of being put off to the side, mostly everything's going to be one operation, and it's on the integer side, it's going to be less consistent. You're going to have those branches. You're going to have sort of more... I hate to use the word less
just
predictable code.
Yeah.
On the vector side, it's going to be fairly regular, fairly standard.
So it's what they're seeing is, as code is changing, they're adding more resources. They're also adjusting the some of the structure sizes to deal with how the code is changing. So for example, they're now up to 6 ALUs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's up from 4, if I remember
Yes.
correctly. And then 4 AGUs, which is up from 3.
Yep.
But these, and then schedulers have grown appropriately. With the reorder buffer, I think that increases as well.
Yeah, it increased to 128 entries.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going from the integer to we'll cycle back to the vector in a second. But to the load store bandwidth, because obviously when you're dealing with integer memory stuff, we've got 4 load store pipes, which can support a mixture of 4 loads or 2 stores per cycle in any combination, up to a maximum of 4. So you can have 3 loads, 1 store, 2 loads, 2 stores, or 4 loads, or just 2 stores, no loads, whatever. The idea here is more bandwidth between the L1 and the L2. And they've increased the L2 cache, haven't they? From 12 way to 16 way?
They increased the associativity.
That's what I mean, from 12 way to 16 way.
Okay, yeah. And I suspect that's why they doubled the bandwidth, is they doubled the associativity. So yeah.
It's they're still keeping a 4-cycle load to use to the L1. So the L1 data cache has increased from 32 kilobytes to 48 kilobytes. Normally, increasing cache sizes, you add additional latency because you've got to essentially step through the cache to find your data. So keeping it at 4-cycle for load to use. You have to be smart in how you're doing it. It's the same thing on the L2 side. Whenever we see big jumps in L2 from 256K to 1 meg, and they go, "Oh, you only went from 12 cycle to 13 cycle. That's amazing," rather than it being 15 cycle, which you might think would be more normal. The 4 reads 2 write situation. One of the senior engineers said that's because the ratio of loads to stores in most code is 3-to-1 anyway. So there's no point doing 4-4, for example. There's also some limitations on exactly what size data you can load and store and what configuration. But the in-flight windows have increased. We'll get to the numbers in a second. And again, they're increasing the prefetching to help with the branch predictor on that side.
Well, I just have to make a quick comment on the bullet line that says 64-byte fills/victims from to L2 cache. It's always funny whenever companies like AMD or Qualcomm mention this, because that just means you have a 64-byte cache line. That's been the industry standard for how long? It's more weird when you don't have that than when you do have that.
No, isn't victim when you bump a cache line out into a victim cache, sometimes that can be slower for power reasons?
So, like, Apple has 128-byte L2s. So their L2 is 128-bit cache line. So they have 128-byte victims.
Right. Okay.
But 64 bytes is the standard for the majority of CPUs.
So let's move on to the vector side, because this is where we have the full 512-bit data path. Do you want to go through this?
Yep. Oh, I thought you wanted to go through. Okay.
No, I said, do you want to go through this?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you said, I'm going to... Sorry.
Coffee.
My bad.
Coffee.
So, like I said, didn't get much sleep last night. So something new with Zen 5 is, depending on what processor you have, so Granite Ridge has the full 512-bit execution pipeline width. Strix still has the same 256-bit data execution path. But yeah, that's something that's new. it's something that I'm going to be really interested in is how much does it downclock, right? Because that was a big sort of hindrance with Skylake X, was that you had a massive discrepancy between AVX2 and AVX 512 clock speeds. I'm wondering how much, like, what is the delta going to be?
So with Skylake and with over future generations, they minimize that frequency differential just through being smart. But Intel worked by essentially looking up at turbo tables, right? If I'm running this code, I'll run it at this frequency and at this voltage. And we all know, turbo tables have to be actually give you voltages within defined limits. Because AMD does it's a more energy aware type scheduler. The answer we got from the AMD engineers about whether it declocks during a full AVX 512 this time. I mean, when we were doing 256 data path, it didn't need to declock because it was just it just looked like an AVX2.
It didn't. Okay, so on the Zen 4 implementation of AVX 512, if I remember correctly, it actually increased clocks over AVX2. And the reason for that was energy saved in the scheduling and sort of instruction side of it. Because you only have to pull one instruction rather than pulling two instructions.
Okay. Yeah, minor, but yeah. It's so when Mike Clark said that the frequency and voltage will be dynamic given the stress on the CPU, which is true for any code base, right? If you shove Y Cruncher through this thing, you're going to get a clock decrease because Y Cruncher is really heavy, or if you have any other similar code base. He didn't really answer the question as to whether a 512 bits, an AVX 512 specific code will have more of an effect. He just said it will follow the same guidelines as we've done previously.
I suspect there is going to be more of a downclock, because you are doing a lot of math. This is not a small amount of math.
That being said, AMD's works on a 25 megahertz boundary, so it won't be. As always. Especially if you fix your power limit, it will just ride the power limit, whatever frequency you get. And enterprise CPUs will do that. So for anything that's doing the full 512-bit path, the only thing, obviously, we want to see as consumers or in the enterprise is just hopefully see that creep up over time. But there's not going to be a fixed AVX 512 clock like there has been for Intel. And Intel also now has AVX 512, super low, medium, and high. Which again is another reference table. Whereas AMD just says, we don't have a table. It's just the CPU will request a certain amount of power based on its localized conditions, and then it will adjust appropriately. So I don't have any worry on that side. It will be interesting to see if you got two processors at the same base frequency and you locked it to, or at least you limited it the peak to base, or maybe 4.5 or whatever. And if one goes 50 megahertz below the other, but you're still doing the execution in one cycle or in one op rather than two. So you're still going to get the speed increase anyway, regardless of and it's also more power efficient.
And then something sort of adding on to just the amount of math being done, FADs are now 2 cycles, which is quite impressive.
So that's a floating point add when you add 0.1 to 0.1. That used to be a 3 cycle op, now it's a 2 cycle.
And it's not 0.2 because floating point.
It's Felix is in the crowd. We'll tell him it's FPMX7 or something. Small inside joke for our community there, but floating point adds aren't trivial, and in math heavy workloads, it's one of the simplest things you can do. So, yeah, it's the fact that you can shave off a cycle from a 3 cycle op is good. That being said, sometimes when they say how long things take, that's always best case. Like the 4 cycle load to use is a best case.
Yeah,
it could be an 8 cycle if it's a worst case.
FAD normally doesn't change. You'll see that the place where that will matter is stuff like complex FAD, where you might have more cycles, but that's a bit esoteric.
Math is going to math. Most people do basic stuff. So that's kind of going through the core as AMD presented it. For the more deeper dive, obviously go have a look at Chips and Cheese. This is what they said on the comparison between Zen 5 and Zen 5C. So again, it's going to be the same as last time of Zen 4 and Zen 4C. The C in this case means compact versus classic. So they've gone and done physical design to make the core smaller. Otherwise it has the same structures. It has the same size in all of its units. The only difference is going to be in the L3 cache. So if you just look at the L2 plus the core, the die size difference this time around. So Zen 4 and Zen 4C was 35%. It's now 25%. That's just because there's more stuff in it and some stuff scales differently. Physical design is an art. And you do it because you want to, in this case, minimize die size. But you can also do it to maximize frequency or minimize power consumption. Zen 4C max frequency, it was about 3.1 in enterprise and 3.5, 3.6 in consumer.
3.7.
So the point is, when you do a physical design and you turn around and say, I want my maximum frequency to be 3.7 gigahertz, you can do amazing things with the timing inside the chip in order to do that. They said this time around that Zen 5C is going to be a few hundred megahertz less, perhaps about 400 or 500. As you can see, the frequency here is slightly lower. So that does mean if we have a 5 gigahertz Zen 5, we'll probably have a 4.5, 4.4 Zen 5C. So if you think, well, okay, they've increased the frequency considerably to the main core, and the trade-off is some more die area, basically. The physical design has to take that into account. So that's that. People have been asking about the difference between the two cores, at least from a physical standpoint. In the diagrams that AMD's been showing, which
there will be no difference.
Stop taking AMD's diagrams too literally.
You mean the what if? No, that's just a stylistic rendition. I thought you meant like the core diagram. Yeah, no, that doesn't really change. Don't take that seriously.
If you take that seriously, there are other channels for you to watch. We can get to that and exactly what that slide said later, because that's later in the deck. But Zen 5C is going to be more efficient, lower area, slightly lower frequency, same IPC, just different L3 cache. And obviously, when you have a workload that hits the L3 cache, it's going to adjust the performance. So one thing I did want to ask is, because we now have AVX 512 in either 512 or 256-bit mode, will we end up with a product that could have one core on 512 and one core on 256, or do they both have to be? Or does it even matter?
So quick clarification here. Are you talking about AVX 10 or are you talking about
No.
What? Okay. No. So what that sounded like is at runtime, if so let's say you're doing a lot of loads and stores, like lots of big or swizzles, stuff where you want AVX 512, but you're not doing a ton of compute. Why would you why would you sort of power on that? You could think of it as a second 256-bit pipe when you're not really going to use it.
Yeah. What I think one of the things that Mahesh said is that they're being a lot more granular with powering down IPs.
Yeah.
That aren't in use. So one of the things it can do is look ahead to see what it needs to have powered on cache-wise.
So, Felix, 5C can support the full 512-bit width. What products may have that? We've already said this. Maybe Zen 5, Turin C, or Turin, whatever you want to call it, the one with the long skinny chiplets will have the full 512 width. We don't know. So that's TBD.
It's
or TBA, really.
Yeah. So that's the 5 and 5C differences. New instructions, which is a little bit funny. We were going over this. We have MOV the I and MOV D. So this is just moving direct to memory rather than bypassing caches. We were going through Intel's document about when these would be. I think this was added in Tiger Lake.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tiger Lake and Tremont, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so Intel's had that for a while. VP2 Intersect is interesting because it was on one Intel processor and no more.
Yeah. Quite. Yeah.
Yeah.
Felix is going to get a laugh out of that one.
Yeah. VNI VEX just extends some encoding to the 512 instructions. And then this prefetch instruction. Oh, sorry,
so what VNI VEX does is it basically takes the AVX 512 VNI instructions and re-encodes them into the VEX encoding. AVX 512 uses EVX or EVX, and AVX 2 uses VEX as its encoding. So it's basically taking the VNI instructions from AVX 512 and bringing them into AVX 2. Yeah.
Encoding. Yeah.
Yep.
And then it's prefetch eyes. It's just if you want to prefetch instruction lines into cache early and tell the program to do that. That's coming in Granite Rapids, I think, from Intel's side. So it's not coming into consumer yet, or it's not even listed on the document as coming into consumer.
No,
not in Arrow, not in Luna. So AMD is going to be the first one to support that in the x86 land. Then virtualization, QoS, that sort of thing. Now we get on to the big number comparison. Where exactly is the IPC coming from? This is always a bit of magic how they come up with exact percentages, because you've got to do a lot of relations with and without, and that doesn't take into account physical design.
And then here's the thing: all of these are interconnected.
Yeah,
like your branch predictor is directly connected to your decoding in your op cache, which is directly feeding to your backend, which then has to be fed by the load and store, which then has to be told where to go by the branch. I always take these numbers with a bit of a grain of salt because it's all so interconnected.
It's it's a big change here with the BTB. The L1 goes from 1.5K to 16K, which is probably 2 8Ks, really.
It could either be 2 8Ks acting as a single 16K BTB, or it's a single 16K BTB that's dual ported. In practice, they will act almost identically, as far as I know. But then if you think of it as, AMD just does what AMD does best and just reuse, they basically just cut the L1 in half and then reused it for its L2. What's interesting is that Clark said that it's being acted like a victim cache. So anything that's being pushed out of the L1 will go into the L2. I don't know if that's the case on older designs or not.
Mm-hmm.
But I did think that was an interesting note that Mike said.
Yeah. And then, everything on here is pretty much up. We've said the AGU scheduler, ALU scheduler, they get their own now. 4364, we covered that.
Mm-hmm. Doubling of the vector registers, that's something people have not mentioned. That is 24K worth of registers. That's half of your L1D. Just an S-word right there.
Oh yeah, there's another topic to be said about how much SRAM is used in some of these structures that we don't talk about, because it can be megabytes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We covered vector width and retire queue, and again, everything up. L1 up. Associativity increases with size. That's normal. It's just when you have like the L2 here, we're going from 8-way to 16-way. And then the bandwidth has doubled. That's L2 store bandwidth. The load bandwidth is the same.
So L1 load. So the L2 bandwidth is 64 bytes both to the L1I and to the L1D. Mike did. This was covered in, I think, one of the higher slides. But so
this is speeds and feeds. Feed the beast.
There's something interesting in this slide. I don't know if AMD's ever said it, but you can have up to 320 L3 in-flight misses. So you can have up to 320 misses from a CCD out to memory without having to stall anything. So whenever people say, "Oh, AMD has not changed Infinity Fabric," that's
a big change.
Well, not just that. Zen 4 changed. So how do I explain this? They changed the way. How do I explain this? So in Zen 4, so in Zen 3, they had PHYs that were capable of 18 gigatransfers per second. In Zen 4, they up that to 36 gigatransfers per second. They use new PHYs. However, the actual infinity band clock speed did not increase. What they did was, instead of the way that PHYs work is they run at very high clock speed. They run at like 18 gigahertz essentially. What the PHY did was they doubled that clock speed essentially. So while the Infinity Fabric, I'm completely butchering this, by the way, but this is the simplest way that I know how to explain it, because PHYs are very complicated and I don't fully understand them. But basically, they did do stuff to the Infinity Fabric. And you don't just have to touch the Infinity Fabric. It's also stuff like this 320 in-flight misses. Like that stuff is what's important and very rarely is talked about. I don't know what Zen 1, 2, 3, and 4 could do, but
they have mentioned it before. But usually it's like 128 or so.
Yeah. So this is very interesting because this would mean that it can support more misses out to memory. It can hide latency better.
I just want to bring this up here. Sune asks about performance through all these layers of cache. Will writing always invalidate a cache position, or will it be updating all layers? This is the topic whether a cache is inclusive, exclusive, or like pseudo exclusive.
What would be referred to as mostly exclusive or
So it's in an inclusive cache design, all the L1 is replicated in L2, which is all replicated in L3. You can have you can have L1 to L2 being inclusive and L2 to L3 being exclusive, that sort of thing. Or you can have a victim cache where if something is kicked out of L2, then it will go to L3 if there's space, and that's time based and whatever.
That's what that victim cache is being referred to here, right?
So
L3 is filled from L2 victims. That's what
the downside. So an inclusive cache means you don't have to spend the penalty of kicking it out because it's already there. However, you do pay the penalty of the capacity of the larger cache being reduced by the size of the smaller cache. So as a result, most modern the x86 CPUs now don't have inclusive caches anymore. They used to.
That's not true for AMD.
Really?
Yeah, AMD, as far as I know, their L1s are still inclusive.
I double check that. I thought they all changed a couple of generations ago.
Intel did. Intel with Tiger Lake, they went to a non-inclusive system. But I think for AMD, it's still inclusive.
Yeah. I guess with the 48K and the L1 data cache and 1 meg here, that's not much of a cut.
No. Because you're cutting what?
Yeah.
80K?
So
not even 10%.
So yeah, it's annoying keeping track of all this sometimes, especially in your head.
Mm-hmm.
So Zen 5 and Zen 5C we're initially going to see it across 2 consumer products and a bunch of enterprise products, which AMD have happily put in these diagrams. Again, don't believe what you see here. This means nothing. But the desktop part is called Granite Ridge. It is only going to have Zen 5 cores. At least this is what AMD is saying now. Future could change. Up to 2 CCDs, each with 8 cores, each with 32 megs of L3, using the same I/O die from the previous generation. They're using 8-core CCXs. So the Infinity Fabric, where it has a more direct connection to the chiplets. Really, if I was making this diagram, I would duplicate this because this is a maximum 16-core design with 2 lots of 32 meg L3.
I know what they're trying to get around with, but yeah.
So yeah, there's no core count increase on the desktop. We'll get into some of the more details about the SoC later, about some of the features it has or it hasn't. Then we have so this is Ryzen 9000. This is what they've said is coming out on July 31st, I think. They said. Strix Point is the mobile part. So if you're familiar with naming, this is what they're calling Ryzen AI 300. And I know some of you don't like the name. It's you have to balance what's in the heat of the moment versus what the right way to call your numbers are. And personally, I think it should just be like the Ryzen 2024. It should be like cars, right? There should be a 2024 and 2025. But that obviously makes it difficult when the architecture doesn't change from year to year and you update. It's what it is. This design is interesting, and again, we'll get into it because it has 1 CCX with 4 Zen 5 cores and 16 megabytes of L3 cache, so 4 megs of cache per core, and then 8 of the Zen 5C cores at 8 megs of L3. So you've got a lopsided L3. You've got a 4+8 design. But the +8 can almost be similar frequency to the 4, few hundred megahertz difference in it. That's what they've said. We'll get into more details about that as well because we have those. And then at the bottom line, we have the Epics, the Turin Dense. Last generation we had Genoa, Bergamo, Sienna. What was the other one?
Genoa X.
Genoa X, right. So all we know for the next generation Epic is Turin. There could be another, there could be
we know that there's at least 2 different versions, right? There's the version here with the sort of 16 CCDs, and then there's the other one with 12 that are longer.
Yeah. So it's it is what it is. Coming out later. They said by the end of the year, I think. So we'll find out more information. So let's go into the SoC side. So this is Strix Point. So this is the mobile processor. This is the Ryzen AI 300 series, whatever you want to call it, with this 4+8 design. If you can see on this diagram, we've got 4 CPU cores in green next to 16 megabytes of L3, then 8 with 8 megabytes of L3. So this L3 cache is shared among the cores in each CCX. And then in order to get into the other CCX, you have to go through the Infinity Fabric. Similar before, just the only difference here is that we now have a lopsided L3 structure. The L3 caches have snoop filters, so they can see what's in each other's if they need to pull data, or if they need to move the context of a thread to another core, all that sort of thing.
But the coherency is handled at the Infinity Fabric level. So this is like, think of it like the sort of desktop chips where you have 2 CCDs. That's effectively what this is, just in one monolithic die.
Yeah. It's at some point there may be a CCX in the future that has a heterogeneous core config. Right now,
so
it's not.
That was already a thing, and they moved away from it.
They had a couple of hybrid core designs.
Well, Phoenix 2 was 2 Zen 4, 4 Zen 4C. It was interesting.
And a unified L3.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I guess they're doing probably is performance reasons as well. The GPU, we haven't touched on the GPU yet, but we're going from RDNA 3 to RDNA 3.5. If you haven't
apparently
seen
my mic is still too loud. This is gonna be a running theme, isn't it?
That's right. I'll catch you down again. So we haven't touched much on the GPU side, but the 0.5 on RDNA 3 just means that they've introduced some features that they've learned or co-developed with Samsung. So you may or may not know.
After talking with Mahesh, it sounded like it was sort of. It was not co-developed so much as they saw what they were developing over there and like, we may want to take a look for that. At that. Excuse me.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Samsung has licensed AMD graphics IP for smartphone use. They put this into their chips, into the Exynos chips. It's called the Xclipse, worst name ever, GPU. And the point here is that you do things in a smartphone platform to save power. Throw some bits away every now and again may be beneficial, but things to do with power, things to do with performance, that's why it's a 0.5. It's still the same RDNA 3 architecture, but with 0.5 level power enhancements. So we'll get into the NPU in a second, but this is XDNA 2. This is, some same IP that's in some of AMD Xilinx stuff. Updated video encoders, decoders. I don't think we got an update exactly on what codecs are supported in what formats.
So it's actually live on the AMD website, so you can go and see it.
Okay. Because I know Intel Lunar Lake is supporting VVC. There's
no VVC support. I think it goes up to 10-bit AV1 for the decode, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah. RDNA 4 will be the next jump. It's going to be similar to RDNA 3. And then memory, we have 128-bit LPD5 and D5. So normally memory channels in desktop are 64-bit wide. In notebook, they're 32-bit wide. So we'd call this a quad channel, even though it's the same number of bits as a desktop. And yes, they're using mega transfers per second. Thank you. This is not 16 liters of PCIe Gen 4. This is 16 lanes. And this is actually a decrease from 20 lanes. in a previous generation. And the reason AMD has given here is simply that in most of the design wins they had, those additional 4 lanes weren't used. Because in a notebook device, typically you use the lanes that the laptop comes with. There's no flexibility. And the whole reason why there was that +4 there to go from 16 to 20 was for a second M.2 device. I'm not sure if you've realized, but recently there's not been a lot of mobile devices with 2 M.2 drives in. Goodness knows I've tried to find one that's half decent. And the reason why they've pulled back on that is save power. I think in previous designs they must have been clock gated but not voltage gated, and just by not having the SerDes in the chip saves that. 4 display streams, similar to previous Arduino 3, and then some USB ports.
Somebody asked in the chat if it can support 8K 60. Yes, it can. It's on the website. It's on the AMD website. You can go look at the spec sheet.
Yeah.
Just type in AMD Ryzen AI 9 HX 370 and it will pop up.
Yeah, in AMD's equivalent of ARC. So, so the GPU side, there have been some criticisms that AMD wasn't necessarily forthcoming with all the GPU updates. I mean, we've said there's a lot of stuff on the power side. They've doubled a lot of resources as well. So the sampler rate, the interpolation comparison rates. Again, it's like what George said. They learned some things that were happening on the mobile side and realized they could apply it on the notebook side. Improved compression is always a good thing because memory bandwidth usually
that single-use vGPR write, I think, is actually really interesting. What exactly that means, sort of, like how that will be used, is going to be interesting.
I guess another side here is that it's 2.9 gigahertz at peak frequency. So they're saying 11 teraflops. I've got to assume that's FP32.
Yeah.
So that's not an AI statement. That's that. Back in the days of early GPUs, we measured everything in teraflops or gigaflops because we didn't know what FPS and FPS per watt were. We're not there with AI yet, so we're doing AI all in tops. But this is, a sizable increase brought about by the manufacturing improvements. And now we have XDNA 2, world's first Win24 ready. That doesn't mean you can run 2 copies of Windows 12.
Okay, I missed that on the initial slide, on the sort of run through. I completely missed that.
It's meant to be whatever version of Windows comes out in 2024. So it's not 2 times Windows 12.
I know what they meant, but I know what it means, but
So a little bit of backstory on the XDNA architecture. So yes, it is a Xilinx thing built for FPGAs, built for their Versal A caps. They engaged Xilinx pre-acquisition to license the IP. So even if the acquisition didn't go through, 4 years now?
I think it's 3 years.
They were still going to have that IP in their mobile SoCs, as in they'd still paid for a license for it. And that was built on Xilinx's AI engine V1. Now, the V1, they had the AI EML and the AI ML. They had 2 different sorts of cores. Maybe I'm getting that slightly wrong on the name.
So they had the AIE and the AIE ML.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is the first generation was based on the AIE ML because it's machine learning focused, which I guess probably means transformer based. And there is some differences between the stuff that goes on the FPGAs that goes on the A caps versus here. Some stuff like int4 support and FP128 or some stuff. It's something stupid like that. And it turns out whenever I speak to somebody about it, they never know the differences themselves anyway. Xilinx has really good documentation on the AIE and the AIE ML first gen, but that's for the ACAPs, not for the... So you can go read that documentation and it's great. But this is a second generation. And what they've done is they've included support for FP8.
Into 8.
Into 8.
And block FP16, which Felix...
We'll get into that.
Okay.
We'll get into that. But previously they had 5 columns. They've gone to 8. And if you add up all the differences, they're saying it's gone from 10 tops to 50 tops of int 8. And the argument here is that Microsoft needs 40, so you now have 10 to do whatever else you want to do if you're not Microsoft. Whereas nobody else will have that opportunity because everybody else is playing around the 40 watt level. Yeah, and because they've gone from 5 to 8, they've got 60% more memory because 5 to 8 is plus 60%. They can support sparsity and this block floating point. We're not getting to it in these slides, but we'll get it. There's another slide deck after this as well. Yeah, okay, that's mobile. Desktop part. This is just the one slide on what the desktop part's going to look like. It looks fairly similar to what everybody's seen before. 28 lanes PCIe 5, DDR5 5600. Again, 128-bit wide, so dual channel on the desktop. And then, yeah, one RDNA 2 unit just for simple display.
And just a slight sort of addition to the slide, it's still 32-byte read, 16-byte writes for the data path to each GCD. Yeah, that hasn't changed.
Yeah. Yeah, so new cores, new products. As always with this industry, you tend to see companies update one thing, one generation, and update something else next generation. And so this time it's the cores. The SoCs themselves and the I/O, gets a relatively stable transition for this generation, but next generation they may get updated. Let's go to the XDNA architecture deep dive, just because I think this is worthwhile. So NPU, that's what we're calling AI accelerators these days, neural processing unit. GPUs, same way we accelerate graphics, let's accelerate them with more efficient. Let's accelerate AI workloads with efficiency. Some people don't care about AI. That's fine. You don't have to run it, but it's there, and it takes some die space, so you might as well run it if it's there. And yeah, I could spend an hour speaking about different AI architectures. The only thing you have to realize here is that this is what a traditional core looks like on the left, and what the right does instead is it looks like an array of compute engines with some memory attached at the bottom, which is quick to access, low latency, and designed specifically for the AI instructions. So yeah, it looks like you've got cores and a mesh. You've seen that before on some other on some CPU, except that this mesh does things like you can send data to a node point from one of these tiles, and it will broadcast it out in 3 different directions with just one op, right? So it knows where the data has to go. You don't have to send 3 lots of data and then split it into directions. That's what we call multicast. And these tiles have different, resources, whether they're for talking to the memory, for doing compute, and for actually being memory. This is the same thing we saw on the previous slide deck. Increase in tops, increase in performance per watt. What they're doing here, so there are 8 columns. They can power gate per column. You can also divide your work up at the per column level granularity. You can have more columns to higher priority models. So in this case, They've said we've got 3 models. We give this one 4 columns, this one 2, this one 2. And then we're spatially partitioning it. If we have big models, like a GPT, we can temporal partition. So we can give the model all 8 columns and then split it time-wise. This is the big thing. If you're following AI right now, this is what's building performance. It's what's called quantization. I've not done a video on quantization yet, because I know if I do, there are people in the chat who will complain that I haven't mentioned everything about every little substandard that exists. But the whole point is, we've just spoken about 5 12-bit data paths, right? If your math was 256-bit plus 256-bit, you could only do 1 op in that data path per cycle. If you can now have 8-bit values, you can do 64 ops in that 5 12-bit data path. The only thing you lose is accuracy and range, or in this case, performance and accuracy. So you gain performance by doing 8-bit, but you lose accuracy because you're now, instead of doing 256-bit, you're now doing 8-bit. This is a big thing in AI right now. Annoyingly, everybody's doing it differently because there are no standards. There are attempts to make standards. And but when I mean standards, this is like deciding when a number is 0.
Yeah.
Which sounds like it'd be a relatively simple thing, but it's not.
It's not. When does a number become negative infinity, or 0, or positive infinity,
or negative 0?
Yes, negative 0. Yes.
So the whole point is that there are ways in improving performance of AI models while still getting the accuracy benefits of high levels of precision. That's what this is, block float FP16. What it means is, because when you represent a number in floating point, you have an exponent and a mantissa, which basically means a power and a multiple. If the multiple for a set of data is the same, you don't need to card that around. You can just work on the exponents. The way I see it is, imagine you have a number line. It goes from negative infinity to plus infinity. If all your data is between 0 and 10, you don't need to define your range as 0 to 10. If all your data is 3000 to 3010, you keep the fact that it's 3000 in your back pocket, but you still do the data on all those points between 3000 and 3010. What block float does is it adjusts the area of accuracy, or bad words. It adjusts the range of your data if all your data is very nice and neat in the same region. And that's what it does. And there are programming methods in machine learning that will do this to your data. The thing is, there are lots of other hardware that can do this, but doing it natively is difficult. So, and then as Crispy said, add in sparsity, and that makes performance numbers all the more fun. And just to confuse everybody, they're talking about this in terms of 9-bit storage, which is
so Felix, for you, what this data type is the closest data type to this, is that this is effectively MX int 8, but with 8 elements in an array instead of 32 elements.
This is a slide that's relevant. So normally FP16, you'd have an exponent and a mantissa, which is your multiplier. So 5 bits and 11 bits get you, or 10 bits for the multiplier technically. And then you get 16 bits per element. If you have a shared exponent, you only need to copy that once. And then everything else can be, the different multipliers, different mantissas. Yeah, okay, I've got exponent and mantissa wrong around, whatever. It's all numbers on a number line. And the idea is this contributes to the 5x compute and a 2x power efficiency. The slide's not here. Yes, it is. This is interesting. So if you talk about how many FP16 operations you can do. So when you hear TOPS, from any of these vendors, from Apple, from AMD, from Qualcomm, from Intel. When they talk about TOPS, they talk about int8 performance. So whether that's 40, 43, 50, whatever. AMD is turning around and saying we can do the equivalent of FP16. So not only doubling the data size for accuracy, but also going from int to floating point and give you all that performance as well. That's why Lunar Lake and Snapdragon Elite is down here. Is half the performance. It's a play on numbers.
Yeah, it's in the respect that you don't have to quantize. They do have a point because it's going to be easier. It's going to be easier to get that performance out of it. But on the other hand, it is playing a bit quite loose with numbers.
It's the standard thing of let's pick and choose what works best. No, sorry, not pick and choose what works best. It's we have this feature that nobody else does, and this is the benefit we get out of it. The question, as always, is will anybody use the feature? And you can bet your bottom dollar that with Microsoft, with Adobe, yes, for the on-device stuff, for the tier ones. The only question is whether the software stack that the developers use, as in the more casual developers, or the tier 2, tier 3 ISVs, whether it will automatically do that quantization step for them. And the goal in the future for all of these platforms, the answer to that is yes. The question is, are they as accurate as anybody else? And then you can also do AI on the GPU as well if you really want. We've already said that does 11 teraflops of FP32, which probably means it does around 50 teraops of it int8. Again, different standards for different pieces of hardware. What else do I have here? Because I know we've been going for just shy of 2 hours since we started the show properly. This is the AI 300 series slide deck. Numbers overall seen 3.5. Yeah. 9000 series. And then overclocking. Let's have a side note on overclocking. They had. I actually didn't get to see this demo. Did you?
I did. It was cool. I was actually in the room when they first broke 53,000 points on our. I think it was 53,000.
Yeah.
Whatever. They broke the record that when I was in the room, and then they continued to improve the scores for I think it was R23.
The point is that every CPU has a DVFS curve, digital voltage frequency curve. And normally you'd think it's a set and done. It comes out of the factory with the right DVFS curve regardless. Unfortunately, reality isn't that way. You have variation in silicon. You also have variability in aging. And this is a little bit relevant to the Intel discussion as well. As chips get older, they need more voltage anyway. But for this is a case of, well, if you have a cherry, what they used to call a cherry CPU, if you have a good clocker, then you can adjust the voltage frequency response and basically select it and move it, and you can change it based on temperature, especially when you're going sub-zero, because negative 200 Celsius is a thing. Yeah, so that is Zen 5 in a nutshell. We've gone through quite a lot. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to have, we should be seeing some benchmark results soon. And let me just check something just to make sure. Yep, okay. Yeah, so we should see some benchmarks coming soon on the performance. There's leaks already. I don't give a shit about leaks. I'm sorry. I prefer real numbers. George cares about microarchitecture.
Yeah.
So leaks mean nothing to us.
Yeah.
And Cinebench is a bad piece of software for testing peak power consumption. I'm sorry, but it is. It doesn't tackle the front end at all.
No, our 24 did better, but it still does. It doesn't.
Yeah.
R24 does not hit the big changes that Zen 5 has had. Right.
One of the arguments Mike had for Zen 5 is that because this is such a fundamental change, it's going to take a while for the software to catch up. Dual porting the front end, having dual wide decoders, and actually having the optimized code path for that will take time. A lot of people disagreed with him, saying you should optimize for the code that's out there today, not just the code that may come tomorrow. And he said, we do that too. That's why it's 16%. But if you write the optimal code, again, you could be comparing equal code versus equal code year on year, or code of the time versus code of now.
Benchmarking is an art. It's also
it's a art.
Yeah. Because there's a little bit of a tangent here. What are you going to benchmark?
Yeah.
Are you going to benchmark so I can go and benchmark something that's so uber specific, nobody else is going to care about it. But I care about it, and guess what? That's what my purchase decision is going to be based on, and you can't change my mind.
Yep.
And that's true for anything, right? I know people who way back when sort of in the scientific field, when they would only get Bulldozer for one simple reason: it had FMA support, which nobody else cared about. But there's a very subset of people that are like, no, I must have my FMA. And for them, FMA was great.
Yep.
So it's like, I can go, it's so complicated.
Tell me I can get a chip that accelerates my video rendering speed by 50%, but knocks everything else out by 25%.
Have my money.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. Just a side note for SSS here. I am an analyst for AMD, Intel, and Qualcomm, and IBM, and a couple of others. I am not with NVIDIA. NVIDIA have spent money with me as an influencer, so that's fun. And speaking of random instructions, Intel is going to be supporting SM3 and SM4 encryption tools in a future product, which is going to be a bit weird. And it's going to be on one specific product, it looks like. And with that, I think we are done with the Zen 5 deep dive. Let's move into a Poutine Q&A. So if anybody has any questions about what we just presented, or you'd like to know George's favorite flavor cheese, this is what this time is for. It's let's decompress. Though it will be said, I'll bring up this one from Xenon G. Where's the Zen 5 X3D? Nothing has been said about X3D products yet. However, TSMC has said they do support chip-on-chip stacking with 4 nanometer and 3 nanometer, I think. So whatever comes. As usual, the previous 3Ds were never part of the OG launches. They always came, what, 6 months in advance? I think your audio is gone. I think you need to jiggle the cable again. No, I think it's the cable on your laptop. Okay, no. I'll tell you when we're back. When you're back. Yeah. So give it a few months. CES is January. That might be the right time for that to show up. I will go over some of the live chats because we did get a few. Thank you for Nanda Gopal for the 400 rupees for your super sticker. Much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you. Erkin, another 100 Turkish lira. Proudly giving away 100 lira from my 5950X PC. I'm currently running a Threadripper system, and I called it Broadwell because it replaced a Broadwell system that I ran for 8 years. I'm going to go solo so we don't get crotch shots from George. Erkin also asks again, another 100 Turkish lira. Thank you. Any opinion on Intel's x86S proposal? For x86 CPUs, has AMD considered anything similar? So I think we have George and I have a video on this. He might remember more than I do because I've done about 1 million videos since. TechTechPotato x86S. Yeah. Intel. It's called. The thumbnail says Intel wants Fred. It's me and George. I think last year during Computex, we spoke about how there are certain things that are going to be implemented in, we think, like Xeon 7th gen, maybe some Xeon 6th gen, that will go down this route, but it won't be a either or, as in it will be a switch you can flick in the BIOS, or it may be for specific customers, so it'll be a slow rollout. It's most people we've spoken to agree it's a good thing. It makes kernel development and Linux development a lot easier. Apparently, there's one kernel developer that's really pissed off about it, and has to do a lot of work in order to manage it. But it makes sense if it reduces overhead, if it helps improve a little bit of security as well. It's not really a speed thing. It's not really a performance thing. It's not really an efficiency thing. A lot of people get that wrong. It's yeah. George is definitely having mic issues. I think his cable may be dead. But it's just in the same way that Zen 5 is clean sheet and let's rebuild from a new base. x86S is an attempt to do that. Not rebuild from a new base, but at least let's create a new foundation to make things simpler, and make things more secure. So yeah, but no, thank you for your support as always. That's what makes this show continue. It's Felix says, it's mostly great. Some folks will run into trouble, and for the most part, it makes verification easier. Yeah, it's time to market is everything in this business. So cutting out some of the legacy, if it's sufficiently legacy, is a good thing. Or you just tell all your users, we're changing now. Screw you if you're still on the old thing. Carbonium 12. What is the pipeline depth and how many pipeline stages you lose with bad branch prediction? I think let's see if George is back with us. Hello, George. Yeah, he's still working. I think
So I think what ended up happening was the battery on the transceiver died.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So I think that's what happened because it's not coming back up.
So the question is,
I do apologize.
That's all right. We've been going for a long time. The question is, how many pipeline stages do you lose with bad branch prediction? I think you said 13 to me earlier today.
So on Zen 3 and 4, you have a range. You have anywhere between 12. You can lose anywhere between 12 and 18 cycles to branch prediction, to mispredict. With the common case being 13 cycles. Now, Mike Clark said that he wouldn't go into it more, but he did say that do expect to see an increase of a cycle for Zen 5 versus Zen 4. So potentially the common case now being 14 cycles, which that is technically one of the disadvantages of the 2-ahead branch predictor, is if you do mispredict, it can take a little bit to come back, like a little bit longer. It's complicated. As many things are.
Alexander Pushka asks, what do you think about APX instruction set and support of it in AMD? APX, is that a similar thing to AVX 10?
No,
is that part of AVX 10?
APX is the extension of the integer instructions.
To do what?
So like adding more integer registers, so from 16 to 32.
Yeah.
Adding more instructions, like more load and store operations. There, and then re-encoding a lot of old ops in EVX, which is the AVX 512 instruction encoding. Some people are criticizing it because it's not a rewrite in the form that not AVX, in the format that AMD 64 was, but only really time will tell.
Yeah, it's I'm looking at some sources here. APX compiled code achieves a claimed 10% increases efficiency due to 10% fewer instructions.
Yeah.
It had all the features you said, including support for 3 operand instruction formats. New instructions optimized for predicted loads, including a novel 64-bit absolute jump instruction. The changes from VEX to EVEX. Yeah. It's for some reason I hadn't threw that in my head. Maybe I'd forgotten it. And Navjack says, if I upgraded my machine to one of these 128 gigs of RAM and I keep my 2080 Ti, would the NPU and my system RAM run my local LLMs quicker than the 2080 Ti? Never used NPU before. Probably not.
No, unless with the one caveat being if that 128 gig RAM lets you run a better model. It won't run faster, but you can run, say, with more parameters or
this is
higher types or whatever.
This is why we're getting NPUs in mobile first, because we don't have many GPUs. I've spoken to all the companies about having NPU on an M.2 card, because that would be like a little thing that you could just stick in. Systems these days have 5 M.2 slots now.
I mean, Google had one of those, didn't it?
No, that wasn't an M.2. That was a USB. That was the Coral, based on the TPU V1.
I thought it did come in the M.2 format.
Intel's VPU V2, not the V2.7 in Meteor Lake, but the V2, had an M.2 version for embedded, but they never commercialized it properly. And I keep saying that's one way to get thousands of people using your hardware, is to offer it in that format. NVIDIA's answer is, you got a big GPU, so why not use that instead? Which is in the early cycle of where we are with NPUs and AI, that's a recommended position to take. However, I don't think it's the long-term solution.
I think it's... Here's the thing. It's the Wild West right now. It's essentially the early 2000s of NPUs for all intents and purposes. It took, 10, 12 years to start, well, less than that, but about 10 years to start really getting sort of standards and well-defined stuff out.
Yeah, it's going to take time, just in the same way that gaming took time as we as people in the gaming space dropped out. We ended up with two vendors, and then we coalesced around DirectX, and everybody decided this is the formats that game code has to be in, or the vector formats or whatever. Number formats, for example, when that becomes a bit more standardized, then we'll know exactly what we're doing and what the comparison points are. King Lok Chung asks, what's your thoughts on XDNA software integration with normal software? So there is a software package called Ryzen AI software that you can download and use with current Phoenix APUs.
Phoenix and Hawkpoint, yeah.
Phoenix and Hawkpoint. They went ahead and basically designed a standalone version of what some of their FPGA compiler tools specifically for this. I've not actually kept up to date with it since they announced it. Have you?
So they presented this in the graphics in ISV slide deck, but they're if you remember, I think it was when RDNA 3 launched. Maybe it was RDNA 2. No, it was RDNA 3. They were talking about this unified software stack, which is what AMD's eventually going to try and target.
Yeah. So this is more. Yeah. No, I remember what you're saying now. In the same way that Intel wants one API to be its unified software stack for all of its hardware and for anybody else that comes in, AMD wants its own AI software stack so that all of its hardware, so that's GPU, NPU, MI300, CDNA stuff. You basically run once and you write once, and then you can compile to target. So the only company that does this well is NVIDIA, because they have one architecture.
Yeah. Well, kind of. It's not quite that simple.
No, I know,
on NVIDIA, but yeah.
I remember.
Yeah.
I had to program for NVIDIA once.
But I bring that up because
you were right. Coral did have an M.2.
Okay, that's what I thought. But on the whole unified software stack, something, and I know that it's capable of doing it, so I don't know what market per se, at least in the wider sphere of what a market is, there is for I want an OpenCL driver on the AMD NPU because I know it can do it. And AMD's well, we don't see a market use case for that. And my counterpoint to that was, well, your market use case for that is having developers being able to target your hardware directly, which is something that the GPU division has hopefully taken to heart, but if they haven't, it took them a very long time to.
Yeah. So Felix says, yeah, Halo has an M.2 NPU. Excuse me. Also, MemoryX does. We saw them both in a Lenovo system at CES. However, not publicly available. So there's that. You have to. The only company that's really doing dev kits right now properly that's open to the public is TensTorrent, and I recently did a video covering those. We're going to try and get George a interview with Jim Keller at Hot Chips. See what we can pull off.
So you're right. It is non-trivial. It is MIMD, so multiple instruction, multiple data. But it can do it. And I think that is what they should. the biggest issue with AMD products, as far as their GPUs and NPUs are concerned, and actually this goes for all the NPUs in the all the ecosystems, I don't care which one, is programming them is a pain in the back end.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very whoever wins will win not by having the most performant NPU, but by having the most
Developer
programmable.
support. Yeah.
Yeah, the best dev support. And seemingly, yeah. I've been trying to get this across to folks, but
yeah, it's I know what you mean. Sune asks, it seems like AMD is betting on SMT. Are there any numbers on the IPC uplift with SMT? Typically, IPC is just quoted as a single instruction thread.
Mm-hmm.
And you extract the parallelism from that thread. So WCCF ages ago tried to argue the point that no, they keep saying single core performance, so they have two threads, therefore they should win, and we all battered them down saying you're idiots. This has been an industry standard since SMT, was a glint in the eyes of people in the 60s. So yeah, it's Intel is still betting on hyper-threading as well. It will just be selective where they use it.
Yeah.
Lunar Lake not using it is almost an aberration.
Well, it's also like, just because one product doesn't use it
doesn't mean
that they're abandoning it. Like,
yeah. It's this is a question we probably can't answer. Any thoughts on what Zen 5 server could have on the server market? Well, 192 core CPUs.
Yeah.
And probably 128 core and probably 64 core as well. That's about it. Because that's all we know.
Yeah. Like, beyond that, what are the market dynamics of AMD releasing a 192 core CPU? I don't know. Could be interesting, but like, that's not something up my wheelhouse.
So
also, Jordan makes a point. Windows cries after 128. So
yeah, it's I'm running the 64 core Threadripper Pro right now, and I have hyper-threading turned off. Oh, sorry, SMT turned off. One, because Windows more than 64 threads has a hissy fit. Still in enough to make me not want to use it, but also it means that each thread gets full access to all the resources of a core. There's no competitively shared anything if you're not running. And to be honest, with my Broadwell system for 8 years, I didn't have hyperthreading enabled on that because 10 cores was enough. To be honest, 64 cores is a bit insane.
A bit.
I could have used the 32 core. I could be honest. But if my old system was Broadwell, then I've updated once in 8 years. So
yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting moving forward with all these big server core count CPUs. And I'll be honest here, I think one of the bigger losers, if you could say that, is probably going to be Ampere. While their chips are targeted to a different market, I think with Intel coming out with Sierra Forest AP and AMD coming out with 192 core Turin, I could see some struggles there, especially because Ampere 1 still is not in the VMs yet. So,
well, it's their business is more internal workloads than external right now still. So it's I'll bring this message up from SkyMage. What can AVX512 be used for other than emulators in the consumer space? I think this is a little bit of a confusion just because of what news has already been out there, right? RSCP3, if I get that acronym correctly, made a big thing about supporting AVX512, and nobody else really has. But that's because they don't. They see it as a performance increase in their software, not as they. So any sort of like AI upscaling tool that uses CPU uses AVX512. There will be commands in the software that you run that will probably have an AVX512 path that may be to do with scatter gather with data, or if they can see a use for it and it's the more efficient path and it's pre-compiled to do that way, then it will be. The video editing software I use on my Meteor Lake, when it's not using the GPU and it needs to use a CPU for some of the CPU only effects, it's Meteor Lake, so it's not running AVX512, but you know what I mean. That sort of situation is something where AVX512 could work. I guess the distinction here is: do you consider a consumer device one that I would use for work, because that's technically a corporate device, but it's still a consumer grade silicon, right? So yeah, it's
so Freak 777 power. I probably shouldn't say anything, but there are times, many times, where workloads just do not fit the GPU. You absolutely can have times where in Blender and whatnot, a CPU will absolutely decimate a GPU because, say, you have heavy branches or a lot of context switching within there are so many scenarios where you can have a CPU just absolutely cream a GPU. So it's nowhere near as straightforward as GPU wins. That's not. Again, workloads matter. Workloads always matter. And that's what you need to talk about.
Yeah. It's changing a little bit. Have you got your hotel reserved for Supercomputing 2024?
That was going to be something. I was waiting to get the response back from SC24 for the acceptance letter.
Oh yeah, have they?
I don't think I've gotten an email back from them yet.
No, I don't yet.
Because they did open the registration and I did register.
Yeah, me too. 2 weeks ago, I haven't received a press confirmation yet. No.
Yeah, I was waiting for that.
Yeah, it's the same thing happened in Denver, both last year and the year before that. The availability of some of the hotels can go by really quickly because it's a popular conference. So yeah, it depends whether you're comfortable spending $30 a night or $100 a night or $200 a night, right? I'm usually somewhere in the middle range just because I also use the room for filming, so getting a slightly better. Also, if I'm doing any sponsored work, I usually say, well, portion of that is definitely going to, my hotel stay to make sure it's better. So yeah, you do end up overpaying for what would be a normal week-to-week thing, but sometimes it's the cost of doing business. I know, for example, we never got approved to go and attend Mobile World Congress in February until CES was done. So a month before that conference, and it's Barcelona, which is absolutely terrible for conferences, from a accommodation standpoint, everything. So I think we spent best part of $4,000 for a flat for a week for 3 of us, and one of that was there was a shared room and a single room, and I think there was one bathroom and it was tiny and we all had to work from there, all because the company at the time didn't want to approve any travel for the rest of the year until CES had done. So another reason for leaving corporate bullshit. And then 2, are there any CPUs other than Power Enterprise with high latency memory that would benefit from higher than SMT2? You might be looking at some of like the yeah, you might be looking at some of the PZ stuff, some of the Japanese stuff, some of the Chinese stuff.
So jokingly, I refer to one of the, I think it's the I-6500 or something.
Yeah.
You could argue as having SMT3.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even need to be a power of 2.
So I will say, at the start of this show, we spoke about the Hot Chips conference, and one of the talks there is the accelerated in-memory compute sort of thing. I remember when, was it Samsung first announced that, or Hynix first announced that? All they did was, in their HBM, they added a few ALUs, such that when the data was movement, if you put a signal to a specific memory address, it would cause a batch of data, to have something added to it or something subtracted to it, that sort of thing. They said that run in SMT24 because that's how to extract the peak performance out of it. That was first generation. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing then, but some of the AI, some of the compute in memory stuff probably goes down that route quite heavily. So thank you for the $20. That will go towards accommodation for sure. So yeah, time to sleep on the floor of a friend's house, Samarvis says. How many friends do you have in Atlanta? And staying at a friend's house when you're trying to work is arguably the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Yeah, traveling with people sometimes when you're working is another thing. So it's I was expecting an email to come in, but it hasn't, and I'm not getting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody's reading my messages. Okay. I just want to see. How's Tom's Hardware? What are you posting now?
Oh. So here it is. So okay. So it's now official. So
where are you reading this?
Tom's Hardware. Paul just posted it. There has been an AMD official statement on Z5. To quote,
hang on, let me bring this up in the
okay,
in StreamYard.
Yeah.
Let's not share tab audio in case their autoplay crap comes along.
Yeah. Scroll all the way down to the bottom.
Well,
that's where the statement is.
Yeah. AMD delays Ryzen 9000 launch due to unspecified quality issue. Huh, that's not what they told me.
To quote the statement from AMD, we appreciate the excitement around the Ryzen 9000 series processors. During final checks, we found the initial production units that were shipped to our channel partners did not meet our full quality expectations. Out of an abundance of caution to maintain the highest quality experience for every Ryzen user, we're working with our channel processors to replace the initial production units with fresh units. As a result, there will be a short delay in retail availability. The Ryzen 7 9700 and Ryzen 5 9600 will now go on sale on August 8th, and the Ryzen 9950X and Ryzen 9 9900X processors will go on sale on August 15th. We pride ourselves in providing a high quality experience for every Ryzen user, and we look forward to our fans having a great experience with the new Ryzen 9000 series. Jack Hun, AMD SVP and GM of Computing and Graphics.
Yep. So there is a 1 week delay for the Ryzen 7 and the Ryzen 5, a 2 week delay for the Ryzen 9. Something about that makes me think volume. It might not be quality, it could just be volume. because if there's a quality issue, you're not going to spin new processors in that time between now and then. No.
Unless it's something that can be flipped in microcode by a GISA update.
No, but then you'd have.
But even that has to be like look at how long. Look at to go back to the Intel 13th and 14th gen. Look at how long that they announced a potential finding in not that long, like 2 days ago, and they're releasing the patch in mid-August. Right. So it's
I know, but the point is, it's I'm just.
But I mean, my overall point here is that it's not. It's unless it's even if it was microcode, I don't think that they could fix it in this short of a time. That's my point.
It's you need to update all the motherboards, all the CPUs, and they're not going to be opening retail packages. So I think the quality expectations may in itself be a typo on the packaging. May not even be the processors. It could just be the packaging. Because you're not going to do a new spin. Right?
Yeah. No,
and when they're saying
and
quality,
a new spin would take at least 3 months.
Yeah.
At least.
So, and yeah, they're not set, obviously any samples that I've got sent out will need to be updated anyway with BIOS and whatever, because that's normally what happens. But yeah, this sounds to me just like a packaging. Misprint. So all the CPUs got to go back. They got to get repackaged with the new packaging. They take the hit on the 50,000 units or whatever that they've already shipped, or 150,000, whatever. And they, maybe they shipped it as Arzen and missed out the Y in Ryzen, that sort of thing. Yeah. So no, this is not oxidation. This is not a manufacturing defect. Oh, Paul. Honestly. He's talking about testing for known good die, including, this step of the process to either ensure packaging testing process. Therefore, an issue found in packaging testing may or may not be directly related to the packaging implementation. It would still take a freaking long time, even if you had known good die. I mean, with a package product testing process.
Well, okay, so tiny tangent, but if you go look at the article from
as Daryl says, they could say it's made for Win24 on the box, and that was just a joke.
Yeah,
and they forgot to take it out. It's
but considering that they did say we are working with our channel partners to replace the initial production units.
Well, okay. So they're taking the parts back. They're repackaging them in new boxes without the typo. That's all that means. Come on, Occam's razor, simplest solution.
Also,
it's okay. So there could be like a testing thing where they didn't test, enough batches or enough numbers of normally, say a batch of processors is 20,000. They might test 100 from that batch, right? Just to see if there's any fundamental stochastic issues with that batch. They also have the breakdown on a per die, per chiplet from the fab anyway, based on the fab testing. Yeah,
so
it's
maybe they handed a couple. They handed the ball to Linus, and he dropped the ball.
Yeah. I mean, you could say processors that they sell to OEMs, to trays, wouldn't be affected by this. Maybe it's a printing error on the heat spreader.
I won't claim to know.
Oh, my email just came in a few minutes ago, by the way. So yeah, nice and late.
Yeah.
AMD will rescreen the chips pulled from the field to identify any potential issues, then return unaffected models to retail channels. So yeah, it could just be testing a particular voltage mode. But again, that's packaged processors, not part of the packaging process.
Yeah, and I would rather them delay a little bit than have like a 13th or 4th. Well, I hesitate. I would rather them delay and have widespread issues hit folks, right?
You know what annoys me is the state of mindset that we're in now as a consuming public is, even though AMD says that not a single chip with a quality issue is delivered to a customer, you can bet your bottom dollar that people are going to test this one harder than they've ever tested a processor before to see if they can break it, and then call it a systemic issue because of what's been in the press recently. Do you remember back years ago we would have to deal with people complaining about extreme degradation on their processors, only to find out they've been running Prime 95 for a week with stock cooling?
It's like, that's not
no
degradation.
Shit.
That's just you being stupid.
Yeah.
And
Omnis says they printed Ryzen 9 9999X.
It rounded up to Ryzen 10, yeah.
It's that floating point.
Slight tangent. And here's a rant. I'm about to get on my soapbox. The tech media and just media in general has become so negative as of late, and people have stopped asking the question why, what or how. Not there. Okay, perfect example: the Turin slide that Intel fought against at Computex.
Yeah.
No, everybody's like, oh, everybody jumped to the conclusion, oh, AMD lied. No, that's not what. The question you need to ask is, how did AMD get those numbers?
Mm-hmm.
But seemingly people have stopped asking that question, and it's fucking infuriating.
It's I mean, this is a wider discussion. The way journalists and media earn money these days is changing. Before video, it used to be all on-site ads. As a result, as some of that money moving out and some people spending less, they're being more obtrusive. They're being more annoying with their ads, but they're also having to put in some more severely clickbaity headlines to get people through the door. Not so much a problem in video in the tech space, except for a few people. We know that there are some people who have grown substantially through being substantially negative, or we know that when they're negative, it dries up the views. When they turn up at a vendor's door at 8 a.m. on Monday morning after posting a video Friday night at 5 p.m. before anybody's had a chance to look at it, respond during working hours. That sort of things happens, or any leak or anything. It becomes all about, I'm the one that presented this leak. I'm the one that presented this leak. I'm the one that presented this leak. Not about
not daily games.
We're in an industry where your work should speak for yourself, and yes, you should get fairly compensated for your work. Quality and speed is a dial. But there's a reason. Tooting our own horns here because we're allowed to. This is a reason why George and I go and speak to engineers. We go and try and find the details that we think you, as our audience, want to hear about. And then listen to us talk about all the different comparison points about what goes on in this space and where the direction is going. Because I know I speak to investors pretty much on a weekly basis these days, because they're always wondering about what the latest competitive nature is, how people are thinking about things internally, and I can give them public statements about what's going on. We're just coming up to financial season, that sort of thing. I was speaking with a company today about doing some content with them in the future about, what's next for their, what should they focus on for their big marketing push that will get them seen as a technical powerhouse in what they do. So we were going over some of the things that they do differently to other people, but also some of the ways in which they lead from a tech space. There are media in the industry who refuse to speak to engineers, and I know this because I've repeatedly asked them, why don't if you had an infinite money, infinite time, why don't you speak to engineers? And they say because they'll just lie to us, because they're paid for by the company, we want the honest to God consumer out of box experience. But my response to that is, how can you provide extra value that people don't know about if you don't go do these things? And different strokes, different folks, whatever. It is what it is. Some of these guys do good work, and I do call them out when they do good work, when they find interesting things. I rarely hold grudges unless you've ripped off my content and not cited me. So it's there's been a few of those, but otherwise, do good work. I'm more than happy to have conversations and speak to people who I think are being honest about what they do, and our viewpoint, have the viewpoint of this industry is evolving into something positive. Let's do right by the consumer. Let's find out what the next stage in Moore's Law is. Fun fact: I have a video going live tomorrow where I have a pretty big multi-billion-dollar company VP saying he doesn't care about Moore's Law, and
I wonder what company that could be.
It ain't Nvidia. Let's put it that way. Because I know Nvidia's a big proponent of Moore's Law dead.
Intel either.
It's a very funny interview, and there's a video and a thing going up on the newsletter about that as well. So lots of things going on. We're just coming shy of 3 hours since we started the stream, so I think we should perhaps put a pin in it there. Because I need to have dinner, and it's 9:30 now.
I need lunch.
We did wonder whether we were going to stay up for that announcement. I knew something was coming. I didn't know exactly what and when, but I knew kind of when.
I suspected something was up because, to not issue any CPUs is a bit weird.
Okay, that's a bit behind the scenes. Normally, when companies sample us, right, we can't tell people we've got a CPU for testing, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason why this green screen is here, right?
Yeah.
So the so some of the behind the scenes stuff is that these companies sample 1, 2, 3 weeks ahead of launch. So
I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily behind people getting samples to run stuff. I don't think it's necessarily behind the scenes.
No, but knowing exactly who, when, where, and
I guess I don't really see that as behind the scenes info personally.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's behind the scenes that we may speak about in person, perhaps not on camera. But let's cut it there because we've gone through AMD Zen stuff quite a lot. Let's see what we'll talk about next week, whether Intel's fixed the issue or something else.
Another 3 hours for next week.
Well, I mean, it's we'll we have to check versus the WAN show, see if we beat them. Probably not.
No,
because they go through a million merch messages. So it's thank you all for sticking around. Thank you to those who sent in super chats, much appreciated. Thank you. You will find my content on this channel, TechTechPotato. I also have a newsletter called More Than More. For anybody who's wondering, More Than More is the company. TechTechPotato is the YouTube brand. George runs the newsletter, the blog, however you want, the website over at Chips and Cheese. yeah, at chipsandcheese.com. They also have a new YouTube channel with the interview with Mike Clark on. You'll see some more stuff going up on there. So please do give him a couple of subscribes as well.
And I do sincerely apologize for the audio issues.
That's fine. It's fine.
First time trying this setup, something was about to go wrong.
Awesome. Well, thank you all, and we'll see you on the next one.
Have a good one.